Microphone working? Yep.
I think so. Hi.
Wow, Zara, it's the most obvious question to ask. How did you come across this story, and what made you decide the way in which you were going to make this film?
So I was doing a series of films for charity, like short little documentaries about different charities around the world, and I met a charity that were funding that school and that going home journey, and I was just blown away by, first of all, by Nepal, by the people that ran the charity, and stayed in touch with them. And then about 2 years later, they said, God, we've just started funding this school where the children don't see their parents for 12 years, and we've decided we're going to start helping them to make that journey home, because the school had been going for, I think, about 10, 15 years at that point, and children weren't going home. So they kind of decided that they would support these kids to go home after 12 years. And that thought was just extraordinary, to not see your parents for 12 years.
But did you have at that stage any idea of the sheer, the remoteness? I've got to say, I'm feeling slightly guilty. I went to Nepal when I was 18. My excuse to get it out of the way is I was exhausted from travels and working in India, but I spent most of my time eating apple pie, drinking tea and smoking the kinds of special cigarettes you couldn't get very easily in West London. You must have had some idea of the vastness and remoteness of the country.
Yeah, I didn't know quite how hard it would be, and I think I was sort of slightly woefully unprepared for the journey. I was in pain a lot of the time, and on painkillers, and so I wasn't quite fit enough for it. But it was more extreme than I expected, and I think also the sleeping conditions. I mean, as you see in the film, it's very, very kind of basic, very rudimentary. It's not like the Annapurna circuit or something where you're stopping at tea houses and having pizza and a Coke or a beer at the end of the night. We were like literally sleeping on the floor with rats running over our beds and cockroaches, and came back sort of covered in bed bug bites. So it was extreme. And in terms of filmmaking as well, quite a difficult environment to work in, because not having electricity, cold environment. So we had to kind of adapt the way that we shot it.
I don't know how many people are aware, but a lot of that was filmed not just by Zara, but by all three who went on the journey, including Nima. I want to ask you, you had to not only do this extraordinary physical journey and an emotional journey, but also learn to be a cameraman. And I think anyone who's ever tried to take even a still photo in snow will know it's not easy. You were doing very advanced camera work. How was that for you?
Actually, I would like to say good evening to everyone. Thanks for giving your precious time to watch our story, and it means a lot for me. And I get very shy when talking in the public and facing in front of the camera. But even though, like, we asked donation from the people to get back to our village, so and Zara and Marcus have already given us instruction that not to shoot there is any risky and all these things. But I have a kind of feelings that we have to show the difficulties, why we are asking for money and why we need a proper gear to go there. So that's why I took some video clips so that that convince people that it's really a difficult.
You're being very modest. Took some video clips. That's kind of what I do on holiday. I mean, I'm not doing down your work, Zara, but you and your fellow students produced some extraordinary filmmaking. I mean, anyone watching that.
It's extraordinary.
When
and
I
also,
saw it, I didn't realise that they'd filmed it.
No, and also, I mean, I should say that entire section, so from Foxundo Lake, where the earthquake hit, I'd actually left a day before the earthquake hit. So that whole section until Nima's sort of back in his village, every shot in that really, really dangerous, treacherous ice climb, that was all self-shot by Nima, for the first time ever operating a camera.
I should tell people, you're very, very modest. Since then, Nima has got into film school in Nepal. You're now learning to be a cinematographer, so you've got a taste for it, yeah?
Like in our country, like it's education is being like a kind of business for some of the rich people. And even though I try one college called Oscar International College, and I started off my first year and I completed the first year, and suddenly I had to drop it because of some problem, and then I started working. And the day before yesterday I got like it's
Sponsorship. So we've just been at Aldborough Doc Fest, and Nima had problems with sponsorship for film school, and it was amazing because having seen the film, one of the audience members came up and said, "Look, here's some money for your entire next year at film school," you know. So
Okay, I've got to ask you, I mean, Zara, no offence to you or to any other documentary makers in the audience, but documentary makers sometimes do have the image of being control freaks, and you had to do exactly the opposite. You had to hand over the filmmaking, or much of it, 2, 3, if you don't mind me saying so, amateurs, and then just wait and see what the results were. How was that for you?
yeah, and you're right, you know, very, very unusual. Hadn't done it before, and usually I'm a bit of a control freak about that kind of thing. But it was kind of, because of the society, because it's a place where tourists don't go, we thought, well, this is going to be a way that we're going to get inside the society, because what was tending to happen when we went there was people were not looking at their children returning, they would be looking at us, you know, because we're like these aliens that they'd never seen before. No one, there are no tourists in that region. And so we kind of anticipated that, and we thought, and actually it's a much nicer way, it's a much more gentle way to handle the subject as well, because it means that the children are in control of it, and it's such a kind of emotional moment for them that we felt we didn't want to be kind of imposing too much on it as well. And I think it was easier for you guys as well, wasn't it, having the cameras there? In a way, it was like they had a friend, you know, and so a lot of the footage that came back were like video diaries where they're talking to the camera and through the camera talking to us, so I went backwards and forwards, either with my co-director or with my cameraman. And even in moments where we weren't there, the clips we'd get back would be the kids talking to us, and it was just like someone sort of holding their hand. And I actually, now I really like it. I want to do it again as a filmmaking.
Of handing over, no. I mean, making a virtue necessity maybe in some way.
Yeah.
I've got other questions I want to ask both of you, but I'd like to open up to the audience. We've got a roving microphone there. Any questions over there?
Thank you. Nima, your colleague, the woman, her mother said something that was particularly striking, and one understood why she said it. That being that that the old traditions, or the traditions that she had, were going to, she wanted them to expire, she wanted them to finish. But that was, to an extent, what was one of the things that was so particular about the film. What's your observation, what's your comment on that very striking comment from that woman?
So that's the comment from Serendipiti's mother, you know, where she says she doesn't mind if people move to the city because if they lose their traditions, it won't matter.
It's a great question. I can give my observation only. So I think most of the young children and all the children come to Kathmandu and learn modern educations, and then they go back to their village, and they spend their time with their families, and then slowly we start getting to know our own tradition. So whereas I also learn why we celebrate Losar. We have three different kind of Losar. So we have Gyalpo Losar, Tamu Losar, Sonam Losar. So in Kathmandu we used to celebrate only Gyalpo Losar because it's like a New Year for us, and we know only that Losar, about that Losar. And suddenly when we did the going back home program, and then we came to know that the Sonam Losar is also celebrated in my village, and I asked why we celebrate that, and they told me that we celebrate it because our farming and all this cutting the crops, after cutting the crop, and then we make a wheat. So after that we celebrate for that, and that's called a Sonam Losar, and that's a new year for us. So, and in this way, I think we get to learn when we go back there. I think it doesn't get disappear, and we still practical the mother tongue. Even Srindiki, when she get a call from her mother, she's speaking their own language, not in the Nepali language.
Can I just push this point, because I am curious. I was like you, struck by that almost throwaway line. If some of those cultures, if those traditions of the village do slowly go away, if people leave the villages, will you feel something important has been lost? Is it important to keep those traditions? Or like that woman, do you not feel so important?
No, it's very important for us. Like Nepal is known as like a lot of religions and a lot of Hindus, like caste, different castes. So it's very important. And I don't think so. It's going to be lost because a lot of people go back, and nowadays like school establishment, the government have government are planning to build a school, proper school in each village, where there is already some school in a different village, but they don't have like high quality education as Kathmandu like in town ever have. So that's the problem. And otherwise the practical and all these things, I think through tradition it won't be lost. And
I think also because the children go home to the villages, that's what creates that connection and in a way preserves the village culture, because when they're at the school, they're in the city environment, they don't know that. By going home, they get to know the villages. Hopefully you can see like they're slowly developing it, you know, like Serendeki teaching her mother about hygiene and those kinds of things. They're slowly bringing those lessons back to the village, and also the going home journey helps the students to care about the villages, so they kind of become a bridge like between the village culture and the city culture, which in a way, if they didn't do that, might end up being eroded, because everyone might just leave, and it's this kind of this going home journey that maintains and preserves that link.
Any other questions? Any more questions? Yeah, got one over here.
For me, I felt like the journey home was the biggest thing, rather than actually meeting the parents in a way, because I felt like your parents have already made a decision for you to have a better life. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to know your feeling on that, because yeah, the journey in itself was amazing, and it was almost like an anticlimax, because normally in a normal documentary it would be the climax meeting the parents, but that was almost like an anticlimax. But the journey was the whole thing.
yeah, when I arrived in my village, and I felt very bad because I didn't saw my father over there, and I felt very sad. And slowly I came to like I'm used to with my brother and sisters, and they care me a lot, and slowly then my brother-in-law's brother, he told me all the stories and saying that your father left this place because of problem with a sister-in-law. So and then I felt very sad, and then but in other way I have to like I have a 1.5 month holiday, so I have to spend there, and then I used to with that, and then I feel so much touched with my sisters and brother, and then slowly I come up with that, and then like after that journey and after two years, then I met my father in Pokhara, a place called Pokhara. So my brother, he got like sponsorship to travel because he's a monk, and he got some place to travel. So he's like Mustang to travel, and then he brought halfway, and I went halfway. So we met for a short time. Yeah, it was very okay, but he was always telling that he have so many children, but still he's like he's in like not proper care. So he was saying that, and no, I gave that shoes to my brother because I have to give at least some of my family. So it goes. Because they work in the field without wearing any boots and things. It's very cold because I also I went to work in the field, and it was very cold, and I gave it to him.
I think you make a very good point. I mean, I'd like to ask Zara about that, because I guess like you, I was certainly, when I saw this the first time, waiting for my Hollywood moment. They're going to see each other, they'll run into each other's arms, and in fact what you call the anti-climax, the film in a sense to me is what gave the film such poignancy. I mean, Was it what you were expecting, or did you not know what to expect?
I don't know. I expected the Hollywood hug, you know. I mean, I think in our culture, you know, of course, if you haven't seen someone for a long time and you know, it's such an important relationship, yeah, we were totally expecting that this was going to be a real high point of the film. And when it came to editing the film, you know, to make that into it, because we still wanted it to be a moment, you know, and it is still a moment. It's just a really subtle moment. So that was probably like one of the hardest things we had sort of editorially, was like, how do we build that? And that's kind of, you know, intercutting the two arriving at the same time, help that and help sort of underline that. But yeah, it was kind of an anticlimax. But then, you know, it was like the very start point, and then you just see the relationship develop over time. So I think, in a way, it's not the reunion moment that is important. It's the spending time. It's the starting to understand each other's culture, even for the parents to understand what an educated child looks like. Because, like, there's for example, Serengeti, the girl in the film, when she got home, her mother said to her, "So now you've been educated, do you have any idea why I bleed every month? Because I have this blood, I don't know, every month it's coming. What is that?" You know, and this is a woman who's got 2 children who has no idea what a period is. You know, and so Serengeti obviously can tell her mother that, who then tells all the rest of the villagers. And so, yeah, it wasn't necessarily what we expected. We thought it would be about the reunion, but actually it's about 2 cultures coming together and learning how to understand each other and teaching each other, you know, and the children are teaching the parents about things like that, things like sanitation, and then the parents are teaching, you know, those elements of unity that Nima talks about in the film.
I mean, I was struck by, I'm always very suspicious when anyone talks about universal stories, but at the risk of sounding crass, I was thinking how this has been a theme, certainly in Britain, in post-war films and plays, the children who, through social mobility and post-war university education, went off, had an education, and found this great gap with their parents and what should have been a wonderful thing. And you're going to have to forgive me for being very crass. Anyone who remembers Coronation Street and Ken Barlow and his father, which makes it crass. This was my earliest memory of it, that Ken Barlow had gone off to university, and he would come home and his father was kind of irritated by his son's rather swanky ways. And I was watching this played out in a completely different context, but that painful gap. I mean, it wasn't the same for you, I suppose, because your father and mother weren't there, but you could understand what the others were going through, yeah?
And actually, my mother was like passed when I was born. Well, like when I was age 1, and then she passed.
But with your siblings, did you feel, do you mind me asking, it's a personal question, did you feel a gap because you had this education and your brothers, your brother-in-law, sister-in-law, they had not? It was a difference.
Yeah, it was actually the difficulty is like some can afford to come to Kathmandu often, you know, and some cannot. And my family is like on that, they cannot afford to come Kathmandu often. So that's the because. And when the students are in the Kathmandu, we always think that they don't care, and that's why they are not coming. So we also don't understand the gap, why it is so. So that's why the journey home is very essential and important for me, because I came to know all the difficulties and all the gap, why it is kept the gap between my parents and me. So it's
I'm
very
looking at you sitting there, I keep thinking that, you know, your journey from the thousands of miles from Kathmandu to Paddington is actually a rather simple journey compared to just going home to see, you know, that thought. So I think it was another question, and someone else had their hands up there. Well, if you wait for the microphone.
Really, my question is to Nima. The kids in the school that you are at, what is the ethos of the school in terms of what they're teaching them that their future lies? Where does it lie? Is it the education provides them the means to provide for their families, or is it that giving them an education, you can go back to your village to do something with that education? Because if you take the Sherpa element and you take Lukla as a place, there is a place that 30 years ago was a backwater. Now it's a thriving business community because of the trekking and everything that goes on. Do you see that in these areas in Nepal that have been deprived for many reasons, that the same process can happen, that you open up this area so that these educated children can make these new areas for tourism a future Lukla? Is
Here's a
that
nice
what the
simple
president-
question for you. If you do that one in 10 words or less, please.
Actually, one of Snowland students already started trekking over the taking the tourists to the Dolpa, so he's getting established. So I think in this way, I think the students Snowland teach as normal school does, but we have like a kind of emotional, and then we feel that we are from backward and we have to do something. We have a like kind of positive thing, and one of the student is doing doctor, who is going to be a first doctor from the Dolpa. So he's also going to work at Dolpa. So in that way, I think Snowland is producing great student to make the Dolpa develop, and tourism is also nowadays it's going to flow because Lugla get like Everest, there is Mount Everest. Because of that, and the permit is also very cheap comparing to Dolpa, and Dolpa is restricted area for a long time. It's like almost it's been like 15 to 20 years. It's starting like since that, and so now I think in the future more tourists will travel Dolpa than the Everest, because Everest is like just a climbing, and there is nothing. Those who love to climb and do the adventurous things, they will go there. Otherwise, like we got largest national park in the Nepal. Foxumdo National Park is the largest national park of Nepal. So I think a lot of people love to travel there, and there is like different life sectors, 9 different life sectors in Dolpa. So when you start from the lower and go upper and down. So in between you will see a lot of people like different caste, different culture. So I think that's a great thing to the tourists.
I'll just add to that, Nima, as well, just to mention our future plans. It's interesting that you've asked about that, because I mentioned a charity at the beginning that funds the going home trips. They don't anymore. It was only ever 2 people, one of whom got very sick, and the other one has full-time job commitments. And so the school and the students came to us, and as I've got to know them over the last like 5-6 years really well, and said, can you help us, because the school believes this is an important journey home as well. So we're actually starting an organisation called Snowland Journeys, which is going to be a not-for-profit, which is going to do 2 things, one of which is developing the children from childhood to adulthood with more mentorship, personal and social development, wilderness therapy, preparing them for that journey, because as you can see in the film, it's quite extreme. Like, you go from the school, literally they've never had a meal outside the school before that journey. Then they have to walk to the highest inhabited villages in the world. After that journey, they then come back to Kathmandu, and they're on their own. They need to find sponsorship for university. They need to find somewhere to live. And again, like, just super extreme. To then, you're an insulated child. You go off to this village. You have this incredibly draining, emotional, physical journey, and then suddenly you're an adult on your own. So we want to sort of help smooth that out, provide them with mentorship and sponsorship throughout life. But also, in order to make that going home journey possible, what we're going to do is run expeditions and invite people to come with the children and help take them home, so that in that way it can become a sustainable mechanism, which then hopefully will also carry on and develop livelihoods in the villages, start arts and crafts businesses, and just start to slowly help develop that region. So definitely that's something we're actively involved in, and the villagers want,
Let's have their hands. Okay, well, so after you. Yep, we'll come to you next.
Hi, maybe for Zara, I'm not sure. Obviously, the school was set up some years ago, and there's only 150 children in it. There are hundreds, thousands of villages in remote parts of the Himalayas. How did they communicate out to the school, out to the villages, to say, put your children through this system? Obviously, there's no internet, there's no communication. How did they get the word out, and how did Nima's father decide that would be a good thing for his child to do? I mean, there's a massive logistical problem in starting that off. I don't know, how do they do that?
So the guru who runs the school, he's from that region. He's from the village next door to Nima's village called Luri. And he was recognized as a reincarnated Lama, a bit like the Dalai Lama. You know, they go and they find people and they put them through these incredibly rigorous tests when they're about 4 years old. And he was recognized as a reincarnated Lama and taken to a monastery and educated himself. And that was where his whole idea came from. You know, he had his mind expanded by education and he decided he wanted to do that for the children in the villages. Because although, like Nima said, there are a few schools there now, they're generally only operational for maybe 2 months of the year due to weather, and the teachers in those schools will be 16-year-olds who've gone through that schooling system of 2 months a year. At 16, they become the teachers, so you can imagine it's quite basic. And that's simply because, like, an educated person doesn't want to live in those conditions. There's no sanitation, no transportation, no communication. And so the guru recognized that and decided he wanted to, you know, what we'd have to do was bring the children to Kathmandu because that's where the good teachers are. And slowly over time, word has spread. At first, it was quite difficult for him. The school's been going since 2002, and villagers didn't know what education meant, and you know, he would go around and talk to families, and generally he'll choose either children who've been recognized as being really bright or children who are having problems. There's a lot of alcoholism, abuse problems in the families, so, or, you know, extreme poverty, which was, you know, case in Nima's family, or some orphans as well. And generally, like, as word has spread around the villages, a bit like the sort of village telegraph, you know, they'll go to the village chief in each area and say, you know, this child wants to go, that child wants to go, and then the guru will go up there fairly regularly, at least once every 2 years, and mention, you know, and go around and visit and choose the children.
So this lady actually had her hands up first, if we can pass them up, then we'll come to you afterwards.
Hi, sorry, a similar logistical question. How are the families informed that the children are coming home?
They're not really. It's a surprise because there's no way to communicate. So, like, none of us knew that Nima's father wasn't going to be there. It's a question we're often asked. You know, did you know was that planned for the film? She was hoping. Yeah, I mean, she kind of means she's hoping. She hasn't. I mean, I guess in recent years they do see that children have been coming back. So this journey's been going on for about 4 or 5 years now. So they have kind of got into that understanding that there's a pattern there. But
So
before that, they wouldn't have
going
known.
back home is like happening at the same interval of time. So our batch is like fourth batch. So they have like kind of feelings. My brother also, he came to the bridge to welcome me. So
There's only like a short period where the snow is melted for long enough, so it's always got to be in spring. It's like April, May they go, and then they have to come back like end of summer. And also because that's then when those of them that can go on have got sponsorship for further education, that's when they need to start their school year as well. So yeah, it's becoming more known, but still no one knows like exactly which day or anything like that.
You waving to say you were going to ask the same question, or exactly the same question. Great minds think alike. Question down here then.
Hi. So I volunteered in your school. I was there in 2008, and it's really nice to see that there is I saw the disparity between the mountain regions and the school and sort of the city life. And one of my questions was after watching it was, and while it was like 11 years ago that I was there, but I wondered how many children actually go back to their villages.
each year, like
As in, do they go back to stay, or do all the children that are like the 150 children in the school, do they stay in Kathmandu, or do they stay, you know, do they leave their villages forever?
not really. Some study up to bachelor level, so up to there, up to then they work and study. After grade 12, we have to work and study at the same time. And some get family support also. Some
Do any of them go home and never? Do any of them go home and stay home? They all stay in Nepal.
They're starting to. There is the idea is that they come back to Kathmandu because they're only 16 at that age, and that's not really old enough to change a village system, and we've had, so Jiwan, who's in the film, his family, he came back to Kathmandu, he didn't have sponsorship for study, he didn't have anywhere to live, and his family was saying, well, you need to come back to the village, and they'd be sending people down and saying, you've got to come back, and it's really tough for him. He really didn't want to, but it was quite hard to justify his staying in the city when he didn't have anything to do or any money to stay there. And he felt like he does still want to do that arts and crafts village business in the villages, but he needs to be a bit older to be able to handle like the intricacies of village politics, you know, changing the society and everything. You can't do that at 16. And so he was really challenged, and eventually we actually helped him get some sponsorship so he could kind of pursue his dreams. He's now studying fashion design, he's in the city. He does want to go back and live there, but he's kind of making an assumption that sanitation, communication and transportation will have been improved by that point.
Particularly the sanitation.
Particularly the sanitation, yeah.
Clearly, I like that because I spent time in a village in India, and if I'm honest, you do spend a lot of time thinking about.
It's very important.
Question over here.
Firstly, I also volunteered after seeing the film. Actually, I just want to say thank you for that. I watched the film. I was in Kathmandu and had some spare time, and I saw the film and rang up and just volunteering there for a bit in February this year. And I was just going to ask, actually, I know Nima got sponsorship from the film, but is there a lot of sponsorship that has come from the film, from people seeing it? Has it been really positive?
Yeah, it's been really good actually, because again, the Going Home Journey, that charity, they kind of ran out of money about 2 years ago, and so for the last 2 years it's been audiences who've seen the film who've been sponsoring the journey home. So like when it came out, film came out in March this year in cinemas, and there was no money to send the children home, and no way of getting it in. Everyone was just thinking, well, this year's children can't go then. So we started telling audiences, and it was amazing, the response, and we managed to raise enough money to send all the children home. It's been fantastic. And then also, like, because, you know, I was making the film when the earthquake happened, so we did a kind of appeal during the earthquake as well. Got about $15,000 then. I think so far we've raised about $35,000 through the film for the school. And that's kind of like with Snowland Journeys, that's what we want to keep doing, is keep, you know, helping the school, helping them from small children right up. You know, the Guru he's got 200 children now, so his school's always growing, and, you know, he'd love to have 1,000 children one day. So, yeah, we'd love to help that.
Any other questions? Nope. One down here. Oh, sorry, I'm one down. Okay, to Eurex.
This is from Zara. Congratulations on a wonderful film. How did you raise the money for funding?
It was tricky. We made it completely independently, so we, not by choice, I should say. It's just that the initial reaction was, this is a niche film about children in an area like Nepal's not really newsworthy, topical at the moment, you know, in a foreign language. But what's happened since it came out is obviously people see the kind of commonality, the themes of family, love, and it's become a film that audiences have loved, and now suddenly the industry's kind of paying attention to it, which is great. So the way we did it was really just through independent finance, crowdfunding campaigns, you know, some of our own money, some of friends' money, yeah. Just totally independently. And then also, because I've worked, this is my first feature documentary, but I've worked in the industry for like 18 years, doing like short form documentaries and advertising and stuff. So I had a lot of contacts, and everyone, like as soon as everyone heard the story, everyone just fell in love with it. So like a lot of the post-production, I got sponsorship and stuff like that.
Question over there, and then one down there.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, how much does it cost to like send the children home? How much is the journey?
It's about $1,500 per child, which if you were to put it into our terms would probably be the equivalent of about £30,000 compared to income levels. So that's why it's so totally out of reach without support.
Question over there.
Thank you guys, that was amazing. And Nima, your country is beautiful.
Thank you.
My dad is half Tibetan, and from watching the different, contemporaries who went back to their home, you all seem to have a slightly different, I don't know, what are you all from very different areas in Nepal? And I just wanted to say, are there from the different areas, is there a majority who send their children back to Kathmandu versus sort of other areas in Nepal?
I think almost all the Himalayan people, Himalayan part of Nepal, they do send their children to the town area for their education, because there is more facilities and more opportunities. My place is similar to it's more similar to the Tibet, and very close. Our border is like very close to Tibet, so
I
we
saw
do
the momos in the film.
Yeah, so that's the thing, and almost every Himalayan people do send their children to the town because there is better facilities and more opportunities.
There's 25 schools like that just in Kathmandu Valley alone. So, yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, we're going to wrap it up. But, sorry, do you want a quick question? One more at the front, one last one.
Thanks. I just want to say, as much as there are loads of beautiful schools like this hosting children from remote villages, there was also a lot of people had that con families into thinking that they'll bring their children to schools like this to be educated, and then they end up in awful orphanages where they'll be just sold to people or displayed for like people who come as volunteers.
Something you know goes on in Nepal?
Yeah. It's quite well known. So I was just wondering how families can make sure that they give their children to honest people who will really bring them to schools rather than exploit them in another way.
Did you hear stories like that of children that were supposed to go to a school but really they were tricked and they were...
yeah, I heard some incident in a part, like it's a different part. It's normally they does like girls trafficking. Nuwakot, a place called Nuwakot, they does like children, they supply it to the India. But I don't think so. A lot of organization does that, and but still there are a lot of organization working on that rescue of that kind of trafficking. So
drawing attention to.
Yeah. I think also the going home journey as well, you know, for parents, it's that link that going home is so vital, because if you just take the children away, they never go back. Yeah, how would you know? But of course, these parents all know this school, other schools are running kind of similar projects. Like in an ideal world, I'd love to help all of those kids in every school in that situation to be able to go home. You know, because I do think that's a way of just safeguarding the children a bit more.
We've got to wrap it up now, but I'm left with one question, which hangs over all of this for me, and I don't think there's a simple yes/no answer, but not just for yourself. When you think about all the other children, how they were taken from their parents, many of them feeling like my mother, my father, they don't love me, all of that loss, living really like orphans, is it worth it? Is it worth it for the education? Is it still a good thing to do, to take children so far from their families?
Yes, I think.
It is.
Yeah, it is. Because when we grown up, then we come to understand the things why we are there for. So that's why I think it's important.
There's a positive ending.
Yeah. I'd just like to say quickly as well, if anyone's interested in what we've talked about with helping the sponsorship aspects and stuff, we talked quite a lot. We've actually got two partners here today, standing at the back there. There's Phil's like an experienced expedition leader in wilderness therapy, personal social development, and Mags is a business leader and life skills trainer. So if anyone's interested, there they are at the back. Go and have a chat.
And on that note, I feel actually just like on a personal level, I want to say thanks so much for both of you for being part of this quite extraordinary film, Zara Balfour and Nima Gurung.
Thank you. Thank you so much.